Good day, my friends. Pastor Steve Brown here at St. Luke Lutheran Church with a challenging word for us today that I hope you all will continue to listen to the very end because it's important for us to face this challenge. Our staff has begun reading this book by Todd Bolsinger called Canoeing the Mountains, Christian Leadership in Uncharted Territory. The book begins with a story of two pastors sitting at a bar, already sounds like a bad joke, where they are reflecting on how things have changed in their ministry. The older of the two pastors is remembering that not long ago things were different. And he says this, "When I began my ministry in a church in Alabama, I never worried about church growth or worship attendance or evangelism. Back then, if a man didn't come to church on Sunday, his boss asked him about it at work on Monday." Well, things have changed from that. The next sentence says this, "Sociologists and theologians refer to this recently passed period as Christendom, the 1700-year-long era with Christianity at the privileged center of Western cultural life." That's changed. It's not the way it is. In fact, by every statistical measurement that comes across my path, churches in the United States are in decline. For example, I received this report a while back from our denomination, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, the ELCA, that tracked the current trends in baptized membership and average worship attendance in the ELCA and said that if these trends continue, this is going to be the results. That in 2017, there was just under 3,459,000 baptized members. If the trend continues, by 2050, 66,540. That in 2017, the average number of people in ELCA churches on a Sunday morning was 899,000. If the trend continues in 2041, it'll be 15,811. In other words, we are falling off the cliff. And St. Luke is not immune to that. Even though things seem like are going so well for many of us, if I were to characterize our church before the pandemic, we were a stable and slightly declining church. If these trends continue in churches across our country, churches will not be viable for our grandchildren and great-grandchildren. What we are doing is no longer working. We must change because we become a mission field. Leslie Newbegin is quoted in the book as saying this, "Most thoughtful Christians recognize that with the radical secularization of Western culture, the churches are in a missionary situation in what was once Christendom. We only need to look at Europe to see what our future is if we continue the trends." Darrell Gruder asked this question though. If Western societies have become post-Christian mission fields, how can traditional churches become then missionary churches? You see, that's what we have to become, missionary churches. We have to change, and we can. The title of this book, Canoeing the Mountains, comes from the illustration that the author uses of the Lewis and Clark Corps of Discovery expedition from the years 1803 to 1806 that we're familiar with. They went up the Mississippi River. They're trying to find a waterway between the Mississippi River and the Pacific Ocean. And so then they went on to the Missouri River. And they went all to the very beginning of the trickle of the Missouri River, and thinking that when they just crested the next ridge, they would see a nice, gentle downslope with a waterway to the Pacific Ocean. Of course, when they crested that ridge, they saw the daunting Rocky Mountains, bigger mountains than they had ever seen, and they realized they could not canoe the mountains. But if they were going to, quote, canoe the mountains, in other words, figure out a way to continue the expedition, they had to do everything different. They had to let go of their expectations and the way they were doing things and go about it differently. And of course they did. They adapted and they continued the adventure. We are in the same situation. I think this is what Jesus had in mind when he gave us the Great Commission. He said, go and make disciples of all nations. He knew that we'd be going into a whole variety of cultural context, including our own, which has changed, and we needed to adapt. I think this is what the Apostle Paul, when he wrote this in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 22, I've become all things to all people so that by all possible means I might save some. Paul knew he had to adapt to continue to make disciples. We will either change and adapt to the changes that have taken place, or we will slowly and rightfully decline. The Christian church will continue because it's God's church, but we just won't be so much a part of that effective mission. The book that we're reading says this: we keep on course with the same goal. In other words, we keep our theology, we keep our beliefs, we keep our core understandings and what our mission is to make disciples, but change absolutely everything required to make it through this uncharted territory. If you can adapt and adventure, you can thrive, but you must let go, learn as you go, and keep going no matter what. Are you ready to adapt and to adventure to continue our mission effectively? We have to do it. We have to let go, we have to learn as we go, and we have to keep going no matter what. Now you may ask, what does that mean? My answer is, I don't know. If I did, we'd already be doing it. If there was a definitive book written about how churches should do this in our culture, they'd all be doing it. We have to figure it out as we go. But we have to understand that where we are now is not where we can stay. We have to figure out how to canoe the mountains in ways that we never expected. I hope you're excited to join this adventure as we move forward, because God is with us.